Ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Do it.
Welcome everybody to the Recoverysupps Podcast. My name is Kyle Jackson, and I'm an alcoholic. Just kidding. I'm a drug addict. And today I have my guest, Kyle Hickman.
Thanks.
Kyle, if you want to give a little introduction about
Yeah.
yourself, and then we can get rolling.
Yeah. My name's Kyle Hickman. I'm also an addict in recovery, coming up on 11 years, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I wouldn't say I'm super active in the recovery community now that I've got my license, but trying to get there,
Well, yeah, I mean, you're growing and doing lots of things. You're
Mhm.
a little entrepreneur,
Yeah.
right? So that's what I like to hear.
Started my private practice about a month and a half ago.
Right, and
Yeah.
you help people out,
Yeah.
especially with addiction, right?
Yep. Addiction is my
So,
thing.
cool. So I've got questions this time.
All right. Bring them on.
But other than that, then maybe we could get into a little bit about kind of who you are and kind of maybe a little bit about your journey.
Yeah.
This is kind of focused maybe towards a newcomer
Okay.
or somebody who has a little bit of recovery under their belt,
Okay.
and they would be interested in hearing kind of maybe your low and your highs.
Yeah.
And what
For
brought
sure.
you there.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about what that looks like now, and
Yeah.
how you're kicking butt.
Let's do it. Yeah. All right.
So yeah, sorry. Your story.
Yeah, my story. Brief version of it. I grew up in Oklahoma. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I have an identical twin brother. Parents were a little bit on the older side. My mom was 42 when she had my brother and I. So there's a nice gap between us kids. My dad was diagnosed with mesothelioma when I was 8 years old and passed away when I was 11. And from that point, there was a series of deaths in my life.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my dad died when I was about 11 and a half. The year after that, I believe it was my grandma passed away from a blood clot. The year after that, my dad's one of his best friends died, who was another father figure to me.
And how old were you?
I was 12, and then 13,
Okay.
14, 15,
Okay.
like 11, 12, 13,
Teenager.
14, yeah. And the following year after that, my cousin completed suicide from her own addiction and mental health issues. And then the year after that, my grandpa passed away. I believe it was the year after that my grandpa passed away. So it's just a series of death after death after death, trauma after trauma after trauma, and not knowing how to cope with the trauma, like cope with the loss. I hit 16 and then found a group of friends. From the time I was 11, so February of 95, my mom uprooted my family and moved here to Cache Valley. And in the middle of winter, coming from Oklahoma, which was a huge transition in itself, but
Right.
I didn't have a lot of friends and felt like I didn't fit in. I went from a place, so I'm of the LDS faith, went from a place where I felt like I was a minority. My brother and I were the only LDS people in our school, in our elementary school growing up, and on top of that, like it was heavily African American and Native American, and so we were kind of on the minority side that way too. Then transition coming to here, there's a church on every freaking corner.
Cache Valley.
Yeah, huge, just like culture shock. Like I didn't know how to like adjust to it, and then on top of that, like my mom's checked out. Everybody's still kind of grieving from the loss of my dad, and then after that was series after death after death after death. 16, I hit high school and found a group of kids that, well, I felt like I was accepted by.
Right.
And
It's pretty relatable.
yeah, and
Yeah.
all of them like to party a little bit. That's when I started to engage into alcohol and weed, and started off as like a weekend type of thing here and there, and then started becoming like every weekend, and then every weekend became every day.
Right.
And then growing in that, my junior year, I found out that I was barely going to graduate. Like there was a chance that I wasn't going to graduate high school, yeah. And so I buckled down. I disassociated from my friends, who at that point were actually starting to get into meth, which was a good thing for me. And I started to separate from them.
Right.
And lo and behold, I graduated. I barely graduated, and then ended up uprooting from here to kind of leave this environment because I was getting ready to go on a faith mission. And within 6 months, all those friends were all in prison.
Wow.
So it was kind of like these little God shots that I didn't even recognize were God shots in the beginning. And I refer to a God shot like a spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
Like God inserting him
so
into our
it's
lives.
it's like a miracle.
Yeah.
Like a miracle.
Yeah.
Or but it's a God shot. I like it.
Yeah.
It's like a little.
It's like, here, throwing a dart. I'm throwing this in your life. Like, it's not your will. It's my will. All right. I didn't recognize it at first though. But
Okay.
Yeah, no, I moved down to Arizona and lived down there for a year. Came back up here to.
So that was a turning point for you.
Yeah.
Was your mission?
Kind of, yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting though because there was more God shots like thrown in this. Is that
before?
Yeah, and this is where like labels and stigmas start to like come into play. I moved back up here to turn in my mission papers, and lo and behold, I get called right back down there. I'm like, what in the hell is going on here?
To AZ?
Yeah, right back to Mesa, right where I was.
Oh, okay.
Tempe, Arizona, Spanish-speaking mission is where I was supposed to go. And that, I got my call in August. I was supposed to leave in November. September comes, and me and a few of my friends decided to break into Skyview High School here in the Valley the night before homecoming, and to play a little prank. And that prank ended up turning into something a lot bigger. We ended up getting arrested with a 3rd-degree felony and 2 Class A misdemeanors for the terms they used were way worse than what it actually was. It's like larceny and all that stuff.
Jeez.
Like, I'm not. It was
I don't know.
It was just breaking and entering, and it wasn't that.
It's like graduation prank.
Yeah.
That's what I heard about it.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was the night before homecoming.
So what did the police do?
So like I said, we were charged with that, and they took away my mission call for that.
Oh. Wow.
And that kind of, and in the papers, and you can still Google it, it says 5 prospective missionaries accused of vandalism. And that kind of set the tone of January. So that happened in September of 2002, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated in 2001.
So
2002 is when it happened.
22 years ago.
Yep. And then January of 2003, all the charges got dismissed because the officer pulled us over illegally. So,
wow.
But then shortly after that, and this is where like a huge turning point in my own life started to happen, was in April of 2003, I was in a near fatal car accident with my mom, which ended up being a blessing in disguise, but at the time I didn't recognize that. That was one of the things it was the low. Like I ended up getting cut off by a semi. I went through the windshield, airbags didn't go off. Ended up having 156 stitches in my face, and like it just killed every bit of self-esteem, self-worth, everything that I had.
Wow.
Like my eye was bloodshot red.
Ego death.
Yeah, for sure. Like huge. And I was like the most confident person before all this happened, and then I just isolated.
But a car crash.
Yeah. And like I'd walk outside and people would just sit there and stare at me, and I'm like, what in the hell, dude? Like people would come up to me just impulsively, what happened to your face? And I'm like, just reminded me over and over and over and over. So I just isolated.
Wow.
Started getting into painkillers. Once the painkillers were gone, like I started drinking heavily to the point where,
it's crazy to me that you have that hindsight to see what caused you to pick up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have to hash that out.
Yeah.
Probably even me, on some things.
Yeah.
Right? So that is awesome.
Yeah, no, it took me 14 years to figure that out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I was in my active addiction from the age of 16 until 30, sitting in a rehab that made me realize, holy shit, like, sorry for the language. I don't know.
You're good. No, you're good.
But holy shit, this is what I've been running from. The death of my father is where everything started from, and I had to sit there and deal with it in the moment, and that was a huge turning point in my recovery, was sitting there and having to deal with this trauma that I'd never faced or I avoided,
Sober.
Over, yeah. and I'm not kidding. Like throughout my addiction, I'd always find myself subconsciously getting high on the day that he died. So I was forced to deal with it while I was in. And there was another God shot right there because I was kicked out of one rehab, and I got sent to another one. If I would have stayed in this one rehab, then it would have thrown me out a few days before, and I don't know where I would have been. And I look back on it like that was a blessing, a miracle in disguise, because then I sit in rehab, or I sit in jail for 7 weeks and then get put into this rehab. Shout out to Odyssey House, where again, like I was kind of forced to deal with the trauma where it all started, and I was able to heal from that.
So, amazing story, by the way.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and the question that pops into my mind is kind of this theory, this psychology theory that no one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be addicted to drugs one day. Mm-hmm. Right? They back up and they say, humans are logical creatures, and every decision that we've made is based off of a logical series of data that we put together. Right? So when you wake up in this morning and say, I'm going to be a drug addict. Why?
Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a drug
addict.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a logical progression.
Yeah, in fact, most people are like, that's not going to be me, that's not going to be me, that's not going to be me.
And then they still do.
And then look where we turn out, right? And then we're stuck in this denial too. Like, I'm a firm believer. One, they say that it's not a choice. So it comes down to a choice. We all have that choice to pick up the first time. Right? If we're given...
The first time, you say?
Yeah, the very first time we have that choice to pick up. Nobody forces that. Well, I can't say there are certain circumstances where it is forced upon us. But like, if we have that choice, nobody's going to choose that first time to pick up knowing that we're going to be struggling with addiction.
Yeah, years.
If we knew that we were going to struggle with addiction years from then, do you think that we'd really pick up that first time? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Right? So, but if we're given these appropriate coping skills and ways to deal with the adversity that we're facing in our lives, then we don't need to pick up. Right? Or at least we don't need to pick up to escape from that. Some people can be out there and be normies of some people who can pick up a drink and put it down when they want to. Right? So those people can do it, but I mean, I know I'm not that person that can. Mm-hmm. So to me, it kind of all, like, we are like predispositioned for specific traits, like addictive behaviors and those traits and stuff like that. But if we're given the appropriate coping skills to adequately deal with trauma and adversity in our lives, like, we don't need the substance to escape.
So is it, do you think it's entirely a mental disorder, or do you think it's a physical, like you have a genetic, like you just said, a genetic component, or things like that?
That's tough.
Because I'm putting you on the spot here.
I think it's situational. I think that one, like, yes, there's mental health concerns that can lead into addiction, but addiction can also lead to mental health issues too. Mm-hmm. So like, if I'm picking up and I'm drinking because I don't know how to cope with something, well, that's going to lead into farther depression or anxiety or whatever, right? Or if I'm struggling with this and I'm trying to escape, well, then that starts to be my vice. That's my coping skill. So to me, it's kind of situational in the sense that it depends on the person.
Mm-hmm. And I have a theory that it depends on your drug of choice.
It can very well be too.
Right? Because I think that, in science there's a ligand, and then there's like a receptor on your cell. Okay. And it's an enzyme, whatever you want to call it, it's a protein. And basically they fit together like a key and a lock. And if you think of the ligand is your drug, and the receptor on your cell is the receptor on your cell, there's a ton of different receptors, and each drug plays on a different receptor on the cell. So
and that one key, maybe I'm getting into
go
this.
Ahead,
go
ahead.
One key can also fit into a few locks, but there's one perfect key, right? So like,
Like a skeleton key?
Yeah, like alcohol can do for me what heroin can do, but heroin that's the overall key. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That's right. And I think it depends on your physical attributes, who you are, you know, maybe the idea that there's these different receptors can play a role, because all those are transcriptional, right? Which means they come from your DNA.
Yeah. So
interestingly.
See, that's just way over my head, right? Like,
I love that stuff, dude.
It is interesting though. It's like, why does meth do one thing for one person that Xanax does another thing for another person?
Right, but I also think even on your side of the coin, that you can kind of help people in different ways, understanding that. Like you might give someone a different treatment plan or something depending on their drug of choice.
For sure. Yeah.
Right, or what they were addicted to, or it doesn't have to be drug. When we say drug of choice, it just means what you're addicted to.
Yeah, that could be sex, that could be food, that could be substances, whatever it is.
Right. So that's fascinating. So next question.
Yeah.
How has your mindset changed throughout your recovery? And this kind of goes into, what was the point where, did you start seeing a therapist before you became a therapist?
No. Well, yeah, technically I did. Yeah.
Or through your treatment centers?
Yeah. So
or when did you decide to, like, this is it for me?
This path?
Yeah.
So
those are the same question in my mind.
Yeah. So I was arrested with 3 felonies within 3 months. Possession charges and DUIs and paraphernalia charges that got me onto the drug court program here. And through drug court, it's mandated that you have to do therapy in groups and stuff like that. And I was very resistant at first, as most court mandated people are. And I butted head with my therapist a lot, because I didn't want to be there. But he's actually a great guy, and he's a great therapist too. But because of me, like I was the resistant one in that. And it wasn't until like my color got called one day, and I was sitting there trying to beat the system, and I couldn't beat the system.
Right.
Nobody, it doesn't matter. You can do it for 10 years, but eventually you're gonna get caught, right? But my color got called, and I'm like, screw it. Like, why am I trying to fight this? Like, that's not what I want. Like, I'm hurting my family, I'm hurting myself. Like, I'm just sitting here, this cycle over and over again of going to jail, and I'm sick and tired of it. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm going in there and telling my therapist and holding myself accountable. And things started to change. At that point, I went back to jail, and that's when I started going to rehab. They're like, okay, this guy's wanting it, like he's being honest, he needs extra help. Obviously, this isn't working, so let's get him some extra care. Then I get out, and through this, I was court mandated to go to 2 NA or AA meetings a week. And in the beginning, I was just kind of messing around. Like, I didn't really take it serious. When I got back is when I started to take that serious. And I started to realize, like, I love helping people. Like, why don't I get paid to do this?
At meetings?
Yeah, I loved helping people. I mean, I love doing service. I love being there to support the other people. And then what I didn't share earlier about my story is my dad was a sociology professor. So and then my mom was a social worker. So I was like, why not kind of live in their footsteps, follow their footsteps, and get paid to do this?
Yeah.
So I actually started to go back to be sociology, and I get my degree in sociology so I could get like my CMHC or whatever. And the director of Bear River was like, hey, don't do that. I'm like, okay. So he's like, go into social work, because if you go into social work, your master's degree is the same, like your first year of your master's degree is the senior year of your undergrad, so you can do your undergrad or your master's in 1 year.
That's right.
I'm like, okay, like help me do that. I'm like, I'm old. Right. I don't have time to waste, so I'm gonna go that route. And it was actually like some of the greatest advice that I got and I took. So that's kind of what led me into this, is realizing through NA that I love being here. I love sitting on the other side of someone else and helping them navigate through like the struggles that they're having, but also empowering them to realize that they have everything within them. You just need someone to kind of hold their hand and walk with them through it.
Right. Dude. And the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history.
Now you're
going on 4 years of doing this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting because when we crossed paths, I was in treatment. You weren't my therapist, but you at Golden Steps, we had it's kind of interesting to see how you there and also hearing your story then too was kind of cool. It definitely impacted me in my recovery.
I'm glad it.
So
glad it could have, man.
Yeah. So
you're killing it now.
Yeah, 3 years sober now, and
getting a PhD, trying to take over the world.
No, not the No, but I'm still looking to give back.
Yeah.
Still looking to give back, and that's what Recoverysupps is about right now.
For sure.
That's why I'm kind of doing this podcast. It's kind of why I'm doing the supplements too.
Yeah.
It's because I believe they'll help. Well, they do. And
I would say I got a softball game later tonight, and I will be taking one.
Okay.
Before my softball game, so I can be focused. I love it. I'm not kidding. Like, I don't have any more over here because it was. Actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to. I'm gonna avoid saying that because I don't know if I'm incriminating myself or not.
Don't incriminate yourself.
No, we're not gonna do that. So, no, like I had some in here, and I noticed that if I take it in the beginning of my days, that I'm more attentive to my clients.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Cool.
Because it benefits me and it benefits them.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right.
And we're talking about Tyro Serene.
Yeah.
That's the one product out right now.
Yeah.
And the baseline behind Tyro Serene is it's the second metabolic precursor to dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you struggle with addiction, it's because you're seeking dopamine through bad behaviors, and you're actually left with a dopamine deficiency when you are done.
Yep. In fact,
when you are sober.
Add to that really quick.
So I'm curious what you have. So you probably know all about the pathway and everything.
No, I use this acronym with my clients all the time, and it's DOSE. It's dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. So if we think about dopamine, so this right here dopamine enables motivation, learning, and pleasure, gives you determination to accomplish goals, desires, and needs. So one of the things that deficiency of dopamine is procrastination, low self-esteem, lack of motivation, low energy or fatigue, inability to focus, feeling anxious, feeling hopeless, and mood swings. All right. So on top of, and it's funny, because I'll get to and I'm going to botch the name because you corrected me last time. But here are certain ways that we can help naturally boost dopamine levels is to meditate, create a daily to-do list, and not to sit there and obsess over the to-do list, but something that is there because achieving these goals helps produce dopamine. Long-term goals. So if we think about the daily to-do list, so we have long-term goals and what we can do for these short-term goals, right? So these to-do lists are short-term goals, something that we can focus on today to achieve this long-term goal that we have. Exercising regularly helps produce dopamine, and also creating something, whether it's writing, music, or art. So music is a huge thing that I use in my sessions specifically because we can connect to that. And the one thing is foods rich in L-tyrosine.
Really?
Yes.
Send me that if you don't mind. Yeah. At some point.
So here's the thing: is that if we're focusing on that, your supplements is Tyro Serene is L-tyrosine.
That's right. That's exactly what it is, and
so it's balancing dopamine in our bodies is what it's doing.
Yeah, and it's giving you every chance you can get to produce dopamine. Because I believe that the different drugs of choice you have, it damages different parts of the pathway, and I hope to explore that.
It's a natural way to get the dopamine rather than other self-destructive ways to get dopamine too, like meth floods dopamine 1,100 times more than we're, naturally producing. But like phones, other different types of things help that dopamine, like kind of, we earn it in a negative way rather than a positive and healthy way.
Yeah, dude, I really liked that goal taking or goal setting because I definitely, on days that I've planned and days that I've set aside time to write a list of things to do and then try to do them, I can just feel that I'm better off.
Yeah.
Because of what you just said. That's so interesting. That kind of leads us into the next question. What other advice would you give to people who are kind of struggling with addiction, and maybe even someone who feels hopeless about their situation, right? Like, if you think back to you, I had this discussion with Tyler. What would you tell yourself day one or day zero? Maybe that's a separate question.
No, I think you can kind of go on to the same. Is one, it's like, we feel like we're alone. We're not alone. You're not alone going through this. Like, we have that isolation. We want to isolate from others and think that we're, in the most loving, like, genuine and unique, but we're not. Like, our stories are different, but we're all the same. Like, we're all seeking that connection. And the one thing that I always say, and I will always say, is that the opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah.
So what I'm really craving is not this connection with the substance, because anyone who's deep in their addiction, they don't want to stay there. They want to get out of that, and that's where the hopelessness comes in. So knowing that there are other people out there that are struggling with the same thing, that helps kind of fuel that hope, right? So take that first step. Like, don't be afraid of it, right? The fear, we always have that fear too. Not always, a lot of us have that fear of living life on life's term without that substance. When in reality, the grass, for the most part, is greener on the other side, right? I mean, it is, like, no jail, no institutions, no death. That's what the three things they say, right? So get over the fear, that initial fear. Reach out to someone, hit up a meeting, whatever your recovery looks like. Just take that step, because there are people out there that love you and care about you, and you don't even know it yet.
Yeah, you got nothing to lose. You're already helpless.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think that's all the time we got.
Okay.
Kyle. So,
okay, Kyle.
Kyle. Pretty cool, Kyle.
Yeah.
You got anything left to say, or any other wise words that you want the people to know? Maybe a shameless plug or anything like that? Kind of, it's up to you.
Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. I do love the saying, I turned from a hopeless dope fiend to a dopeless hope fiend.
Yeah.
So
love that.
In order for us to get to that point, though, like, we have to get over the fear. Like, I cannot reiterate enough that you are not alone in this. If you're not in recovery or early in recovery, is like, please reach out. There's people like Kyle, like myself, like Tyler, who did the last one. Like, we are wanting to give back, and understanding is like that if you're a 12-stepper, if you're not, like that 12th step, like if people aren't reaching out to me, if I don't get opportunities to do stuff like this, like anytime I get to do stuff like this, I'm jumping on it, because it helps fuel my recovery. Right? So right. Don't be afraid to reach out if you're feeling like a burden or anything like that, because in reality, like, that fuels our recovery. That's all I got.
Cool.
Take another 24.
Take another 24. Mic drop. All right, Kyle. Thank you so much, dude. Appreciate you. Thanks for being on the podcast. And that's all we got. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to follow us and subscribe on YouTube. And that's all we got. Recoverysupps out.
Yeah. Hell yeah.